What's going on, world? It's your boy at Big Game James _36. I'm here with Greg McGarity, and this is the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection presented by Toyota, where each and every week we go over the landscape of college football and how it directly affects the Gator Bowl here in Jacksonville, Florida, played on January 2nd, if I'm correct. So a little different time and prime time.
That's right, 7:30.
So the whole world gets to see the best bowl. We're biased. The best bowl in the nation in one of the greatest cities. We had a little bit of football. Week 0 went crazy as what we expected with college football. The first week of the season, things happened and maybe even kind of put some teams on the scene for us here at the Gator Bowl. Too early to predict, but who would have thought that Florida State would have gone into Ireland and lost to Georgia Tech?
Well, Georgia Tech showed that they've got a really good team. I mean, playing off the momentum they had at the end of last year. And that's why in college football, every week is different. And, so possessions are so critical. I think Coach Norvell mentioned after the game that each play within each possession is so critical. When you only have 7 possessions during the game, as well as I do, every play counts. So it just shows you that on any given day, anybody can beat anybody.
Yeah, Florida State toward the end of that game, 1 possession in 21 minutes of college football. Like not 21 real minutes, like 21 football minutes, which is darn near an hour probably. That's just not optimal. Good. Haynes King showed that he's gritty. A lot of those Georgia Tech players are gritty. Again, Georgia Tech now in the driver's seat, playing for potential ACC championship. Obviously very early. Florida State still has things that they got to worry about. But we also got a chance to see another team that could potentially come to the Gator Bowl, and that would be SMU. They played against Nevada. We got a chance to see that they are not a team that you can just turn the TV off on.
Well, playing in 50-degree weather too. I know it was chilly during that game. So needless to say, SMU got off to a great start. Not in conference play, but certainly with a win on national TV. So sure, I mean, they're off to a good start, and they'll certainly be in contention.
You can't go undefeated if you don't win the first game. This week coming up, a lot of first games, a lot of big games, and you're seeing a lot of cross action where you're seeing SEC versus ACC play, but just teams that could affect us. Also, just a good slate of games. What will Georgia Tech and what will FSU do coming from out of the country, playing in their respective games? Florida State plays Boston College. Georgia Tech plays Georgia State, but the big one right now that most of our viewers will probably be paying attention to would be in Hogtown, 3:30 on Saturday, Florida versus Miami.
No question. Those two schools, they don't play every year, but when they do, it's a fierce rivalry, and certainly it's going to be college football at its best with two teams that don't really like each other.
And two teams that have coaches who are not necessarily on the hot seat, but have left much to be desired. Very heralded coming in, have not won to the capacity in which the fan bases would like. Both teams want to come in, start off with a win because their schedules probably aren't, well, Florida's schedule is treacherous. Yeah. Miami's schedule not as bad, but a loss to Florida could put them down in a downward spiral as both teams, including Florida State, are trying to establish state supremacy.
Yeah, winning that first game is important, and I know we'll talk about this at some point in time, but if you don't win the game, it still gives you life. So it's not like you're one and done. So there's a lot of football to be played, but there's no question both teams want to get that L, avoid getting that L in the first week.
Yeah. Going down to the next one, again, cross-conference matchups. Also, we'll talk about this. This is the only time we'll see that this year. We won't be able to see them next in the bowl game. But Georgia's playing Clemson, two teams that should be considered the top of their conference, going at each other early in the season. That's got to be a very strenuous matchup.
Well, you got two coaches that have won national championships, and there aren't that many currently coaching in college football. But this rivalry goes back to so many years, and it's one of the great rivalries because the schools are only about 70 miles apart from each other. So I'm sure that's going to be a great way to start the day at 12 noon on Saturday.
Going down Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. Can't bring Notre Dame here. They're kind of de facto ACC team, but Notre Dame still, again, hasn't been able to capture the magic that they had with Brian Kelly. Their coach, again, still trying to establish himself. Texas A&M got a good new coach in Elko, but again, a lot of changes going on into that situation. What should we be looking for in that game?
I think you've got one team that's really fundamentally sound, and that's Notre Dame. Even when they played in our game, you could just tell. I mean, they do a great job there. It's a great institution, and they're gonna battle you for sure. Texas A&M, with all the juice that'll be flowing in that stadium that night, I can't imagine what the electricity will be. But certainly, again, it's a great way to spend Saturday night watching those two teams play.
Another game that I'm really excited to watch. I'm sure the defensive coordinators are staying up super late, drinking a lot of coffee, probably stressing out. But LSU versus Southern Cal, like, there's going to be probably 1,000 yards of total offense minimum given up in that game. But that should be fun for fan bases as well.
I think you need to watch LSU. They've got their toughest conference games at home this year. So I'm looking at them to really maybe have double-digit wins this year. But certainly it's a big way to start. It's a big game for Lincoln Riley, too, at Southern Cal to basically establish his persona there for the Trojans. So, again, playing in Las Vegas on Sunday, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure their fan bases are enjoying that city. We talked about Florida State briefly, coming into Boston College. Can't start the season off 0-2 and expect for great things. So, bounce back game. Who knows? What will Mike Norvell be able to do? What would your expectations as an athletic director coming into that situation be? Do you kind of like, if you lose, do you step in and say, hey man, is everything okay? Or do you kind of just say, hey, this is why I hired you, do your thing?
I think a lot is on what the game, how it plays out. I mean, as an AD, I'd want to see a team that's hungry, that's playing like their hair's on fire, that's really showing great passion, great energy. And then if you lose the game, then you're certainly dealing with a lot of frustration because you're probably the only team in the country that started off with 2 conference games in week 1 and week 2, or week 0 and week 1. So there's still a lot to play for. Even with 2 losses, you still have the ability. I mean, they could still run the table, be 10-2, be in the ACC championship game and win and still be in. I mean, if FSU's 10-2, maybe playing in the conference championship, I can see them being in the top 12.
Yeah, that's why it's important. You got to eat what's on your plate. Don't worry about the future. Worry about each opponent. A matchup that I really don't know much about. Again, coach with a national championship. Long time ago, heck, I was playing then, so that's really old at this point. But he's still one of the few. Versus a coach that's actually pretty good. That's up and coming in Minnesota. North Carolina versus Minnesota should be an interesting matchup. Both teams want to run. Again, it's just incredibly fun to be able to finally see teams out here on the field.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of intrigue because the other ACC SEC crossover is Vandy playing at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech is one of the contenders for the ACC champion this year, and a lot of people have them picked to come here early in the season. So we'll see, but that'll be a big game for both schools. Probably not on the national radar, but certainly we'll be paying a lot of attention to it.
Some players that people definitely want to know. Virginia Tech has a really good quarterback, also a good running back, wide receiver combo. North Carolina has probably one of the better running backs in the nation. Let their coach tell you he turned down 4 times as much NIL money to stay at North Carolina, which, again, the NIL is an interesting interesting twist on this season. But as far as right now, it's just entirely too early to just come out and just make predictions about the Gator Bowl and who should be coming to it. But kind of doing a little bit of forecasting, what would be, obviously anybody, we would take anybody, but what would be what the Gator Bowl is looking for in a potential matchup on January 2nd at 7:30 p.m.?
Well, you'd love to have 2 ranked teams. You'd love to have teams that can travel here easily, that have great name recognition, that haven't been here in some time. So if we can get all those things together, we'll have a great game. But we're going to have a great game regardless. You just look at the matchups, even from those that are already predicting before even week 1 or week 0, there are no bad matchups there. So I think you're going to see a lot of intrigue on both sides, from the ACC and the SEC. But you'll see some teams starting probably around week 3 or 4. You'll be beginning to see some separation there. So we'll hold off on projections until probably week 3, 4, 5.
Well, we can't project, but we can tell you exactly who's not coming, what games aren't going to happen.
Right.
So I can tell you with 100% certainty that the University of Florida versus the University of Miami will not happen.
Right.
I can tell you with absolute certainty that Georgia versus Clemson will not happen. I think I can tell you with pretty relative certainty that Notre Dame probably won't happen. They've been here. And can we just go over why can I speak that certainly about what teams aren't going to be here?
And NC State can't play Tennessee.
That's right.
They're playing each other. So if you're playing each other this year, you're ineligible to play in our game. If you're playing in a game next year, for instance, Syracuse and Tennessee play next year, Alabama, FSU play next year, South Carolina, Virginia Tech plays next year, Ole Miss plays Wake, so you don't want to have games that are going to be played in 2025 as the last game in this season. So it eliminates some of those games. But and then you've got the repeat appearances. For instance, as you mentioned, South Carolina, Notre Dame, probably those teams aren't in contention unless some crazy things happen. And we know Clemson and Kentucky can't come back. So present some dynamics there, but you're right. We know who's definitely not going to be here, which is easier to say this week than the alternative.
And as we continue to progress during the season, we can also give you some predictions because most bowl games have the same thing. So like San Diego, if they got somebody that's really cool and everybody's predicting, we can be like, nope, they're going to come right here to Jacksonville and got them. So again, a great week of college football coming up. Actually, any week of college football is coming up. That's going to be great coming up. The beautiful thing about this sport is the games have to be played on the field. And once the games get played on the field, everything determines and takes care of itself. So, and each and every week, we're going to come here and we're going to talk to you about the craziness that happened and how it affects the Tax Layer Gator Bowl here on with me and Greg McGarity with the Tax Layer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection presented by Toyota. Appreciate you guys for listening. We will see you guys next week.